Hey everyone, welcome back to Nightfall Lore. If you're new here, this is a place where we go deep into the worlds of gaming's greatest stories, slowly, carefully, and with enough detail that you will either learn something that changes how you see the game, or drift off to sleep somewhere in the middle of a sentence about cosmic horror and ancient blood rituals. Either outcome is perfectly welcome here. Tonight we're going underneath Yharnam, not through its fog gates or its boss arenas, underneath all of that, into the hidden connections and the buried truths and the details so carefully placed that most players walked past them a dozen times without ever knowing what they meant. The secrets of Bloodborne are not hidden because the game wants to frustrate you. They are hidden because Yharnam is a world built on deliberate concealment, on institutions that survive by keeping their members ignorant, on people who love things they cannot afford to examine too closely. The secrets are hidden because that is what Yharnam does. It hides things, and tonight we are finding them. Before we go any further, get comfortable. Let your body settle into wherever you are resting. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let the sounds outside soften until they are just texture, just background, just the world continuing without needing anything from you. Whether you're here because you love every hidden corner of Yharnam and want to know what you missed, or whether you simply need something rich and immersive and quietly told to carry you into sleep, you're exactly where you need to be. These secrets will come slowly, one after another. Some of them will reframe things you thought you understood. Some of them will make you grieve for characters you already grieved for, but differently. Some of them are so small and so specific that they seem trivial until the moment they connect to something else and suddenly everything shifts. So close your eyes if you like, and let me tell you what Yharnam was really hiding. The Healing Church is the central institution of Bloodborne's world, and almost everything it presents to the public is a lie. Not a malicious lie exactly, more the kind of lie that institutions tell when the truth would destroy everything they have built, when the alternative to the lie is admitting that the entire foundation was wrong. The Healing Church lied the way desperate people lie, constantly, elaborately, and with genuine conviction that the lie was somehow better than the truth. Here is the first secret most players never fully register. The Healing Church did not discover blood ministration. They stole it. Lawrence, the founder of the church, was a student of Master Willem at Byrgenwerth. He did not develop blood ministration independently. He took Willem's research, took the knowledge of the old blood that Byrgenwerth had accumulated through years of dangerous study, and he left. He did not ask permission. He did not credit his teacher. He simply took what he needed and built an institution around it. The Healing Church's founding act was intellectual theft from the man who understood the danger of what was being stolen better than anyone. This is why Willem's grief when you encounter him at Byrgenwerth is not simply the grief of an old man watching his warnings ignored. It is the grief of someone who was robbed, who had his life's most dangerous work taken by someone he trusted and turned into exactly the catastrophe he spent his life trying to prevent. The rocking chair Willem sits in overlooking the lake where Rom lives is not peaceful contemplation. It is the posture of a man who's been watching a disaster unfold in slow motion for decades and has run out of ways to feel anything about it. The secret that deepens this further is what Lawrence took beyond the knowledge. He took a skull, the skull that Vicar Amelia clutches in her boss fight, that you interact with to trigger Lawrence's recorded memory. That skull once belonged to Lawrence himself. Why did Willem have Lawrence's skull? The most compelling interpretation is that Willem kept it as a kind of penance, a reminder of his most brilliant and most catastrophic student, the person who took everything Willem feared and turned it into everything Willem predicted. He kept the skull of the man who betrayed him, because throwing it away would mean pretending it never happened. Now here is something about the Healing Church's structure that most players understand in pieces but rarely see as a whole. The Church had multiple tiers of secret knowledge, each one more dangerous and more concealed than the last. At the base level, ordinary blood ministration was presented as medicine. Pure, simple, miraculous medicine. The people receiving it were told they were being healed. They were not told what they were receiving or where it came from or what it might do to them over time. The next tier up, the Church's own clergy knew more. They understood that the blood had a transformative potential, that it could cause a scourge of beasts if administered incorrectly or in too great a quantity. They had protocols for managing this risk, for monitoring patients, for identifying early signs of transformation. But even they did not know the full truth about the old blood's origin, about the great ones, about what the Church's highest members were actually attempting. The choir, the Church's most elite and secretive order, knew everything. They knew about the great ones. They knew about Ebritus. They knew what blood ministration was really doing, not healing people, but slowly, incrementally exposing them to the influence of cosmic entities. They knew because that was the goal. Blood ministration was never purely medicine. It was always also preparation. The Church was using the population of Yharnam as unwitting subjects in a multi-generational experiment in cosmic communion. Every person who received blood was being gradually opened to the influence of the Great Ones without their knowledge or consent. The secret within this secret is that the choir genuinely believed this was a gift. They were not villains exposing innocent people to cosmic horror for entertainment. They believed that the transformation they were facilitating was transcendence, that the people of Yharnam were being elevated, that the scourge of beasts was simply a failure of the process, a cost worth paying for the eventual enlightenment of the species. They were catastrophically wrong, but they were sincerely, devoutly wrong, which is in some ways more disturbing than simple malice. The Grand Cathedral at the top of Cathedral Ward holds a secret in its very architecture. The building is designed to funnel people upward, through increasingly restricted access points, toward an inner sanctum that most worshippers never reach. The layout is not accidental. It is a physical representation of the Church's tiered knowledge structure. The further in you go, the more you are supposed to know, and the less the people behind you are supposed to know about what is in front of you. The Grand Cathedral is a machine for keeping secrets built in stone and stained glass. The altar at the cathedral's heart, where Vicar Amelia kneels in prayer when you first encounter her, is positioned directly above the entrance to the Pthumerian ruins below. Directly above. The Church built its most sacred space on top of the very evidence of what blood ministration had done to a previous civilization. Whether they knew this and chose to build there anyway, as a kind of monument to what they were trying to surpass, or whether they discovered the ruins after the cathedral was built and decided to exploit rather than relocate, changes the meaning significantly. The game does not tell you which. It simply places the altar over the ruins and lets you decide what that means. The Healing Church workshops. Those magnificent stone buildings where trick weapons were designed and forged held a secret relationship with the Church itself that most players miss. The workshop was not simply a supplier to the Church. It was a separate institution with its own traditions, its own hierarchy, its own philosophy about what hunting meant and how it should be conducted. The workshop believed in practical, adaptable weapons, in hunters who could think on their feet and adjust their approach, the Church increasingly wanted obedient soldiers who followed doctrine. This tension between the workshop's independent spirit and the Church's desire for control eventually caused a rupture. The workshop was abandoned. The Church established its own hunter faction, the Healing Church Hunters, who operated under direct ecclesiastical authority. The independent workshop tradition survived only in Gehrman's dream, a pocket of the old philosophy preserved in amber while the institution it belonged to collapsed around it. There is a secret about blood vials, those ubiquitous healing items you collect throughout the game, that changes how you think about Yharnam's entire medical system. Blood vials are not manufactured, they are harvested. The blood you use to heal yourself comes from real people, from the patients who came to Yharnam seeking treatment, and who, through the process of receiving blood ministration, had their own blood changed enough to be medicinal to others. The Healing Church ran what was, in effect, a blood farm. People came in sick. They received old blood. Their own blood was transformed by that process, and then some of it was taken back out and stored in vials to be used by hunters. The patients were simultaneously the recipients and the source of the medicine. The system fed on itself, using the very people it claimed to be helping as raw material for the tools of those who claimed to protect them. Yosefka's clinic, the place where you begin the game, is not a coincidental starting location. You wake up there because someone chose to place you there. The clinic is a church-affiliated medical facility, one of the places where blood ministration is distributed and where patients are treated. Beginning there is the game's first secret, hiding in plain sight. You start the game already inside the system, already receiving blood, already a patient of the institution whose corruption you will spend the rest of the game uncovering. You did not arrive in Yharnam and then encounter the Healing Church. You arrived in Yharnam through the Healing Church, in its care, under its observation, from the very first moment. The Yosefka who speaks to you through the door early in the game and the Yosefka who has taken over the clinic, by the time you can reach the back entrance, are not the same person. The real Yosefka, the warm-voiced physician, who urges you to be careful and offers you a safe place for any survivors you find, has been replaced by an imposter. Another church scholar who has taken over the clinic to conduct her own experiments. The real Yosefka's fate, implied by the evidence in the clinic's back rooms, is not described explicitly. But the presence of her replacement, conducting experiments on the people you send there for safety, is one of the game's most disturbing reveals for players who piece it together. The one genuinely safe place you were offered in the opening hours of the game was compromised before you ever found it. The Hunters of Yharnam are the people most players most identify with, because the player character is one of them. But the institution of the hunt, the workshops and the weapons and the traditions, is built on secrets just as deep as the churches. The hunter is not simply a warrior doing a necessary job. The hunter is a participant in a system that perpetuates the very cycle it claims to be ending. Here is a secret about the hunter's mark, the symbol that appears when you die and allows you to resurrect. Most players treat this as a gameplay mechanic, a quality of life feature. But within the lore, the hunter's mark is a brand, a magical sigil that ties the hunter to the dream, and through the dream to the moon presence. When you accept the hunter's mark at the beginning of the game, you're not simply agreeing to play. You're agreeing to a binding contract with a cosmic entity whose terms you do not know, and whose agenda you do not understand. The hunter's mark is not a gift. It is a leash, and every time you use it to return from death, you're pulling on that leash and reminding the moon presence that you belong to it. Gehrman's secret is one of the most heartbreaking in the game, and one of the most carefully concealed. He presents himself as a mentor, a guide, a wise and weary old man who has seen everything and wants to help you navigate it. And he is all of those things. But he is also a prisoner who has been in his cell so long that he's begun to furnish it. The hunter's dream, that peaceful twilight garden where you upgrade your weapons and speak to the doll, is Gehrman's cage. He did not build it. He did not choose it. He was bound to it by the moon presence as part of a bargain that the game implies he made in grief and desperation and did not fully understand at the time. The secret within Gehrman's secret is the doll. He built her. With his own hands, in the workshop, using his skills as a craftsman, he constructed an articulated doll in the likeness of Lady Maria, the hunter he loved. And the moon presence animated her, gave her something like consciousness, something like feeling, something like the warmth that Maria herself never offered him. The doll is Gehrman's grief made physical, his longing for someone who is gone, given a form that can speak back to him, that can tend to him, that can be present in the way Maria never allowed herself to be. The doll knows this, or something in her knows it. When she speaks about being created to care for hunters, there is a quality to her voice that suggests awareness of her own constructed nature, of the gap between what she is and what she was made to resemble. She's gentle with Gehrman, specifically, particularly gentle, in a way that goes beyond her general warmth toward hunters. She knows what she represents to him, and she tends to that knowledge carefully because it is all she can give him. Here is a secret about Lady Maria that changes how you see her fight. When you encounter her in the hunter's nightmare, she is guarding the research hall and the path to the fishing hamlet beyond it. She fights with her rakuyo, the twin-blade weapon she was famous for, despite having thrown it into a well years before her death. She fights using her own blood, setting it alight, turning her own body into a weapon in increasingly desperate ways as the fight progresses. This escalation is not simply a mechanical difficulty curve. It is Maria burning herself up, using herself as fuel. She's not fighting to win, she's fighting to delay, to keep you from what lies beyond her as long as she possibly can. Every phase of her fight is more self-destructive than the last, because she is willing to destroy herself completely if it means keeping one more person from reaching the fishing hamlet and learning what was done there. The secret Maria is protecting is the guilt that defined the last years of her life. She was present at the fishing hamlet massacre. She participated in it. She killed people alongside the scholars who conducted that atrocity, and the weight of that participation broke something in her that never healed. She threw her rakuyo into the well of the hamlet as a symbolic rejection of what she had done with it. She retired from hunting. She took a position at the research hall caring for patients, perhaps seeking some form of redemption through service. But redemption for what happened at the hamlet was not available, and she knew it, and she lived with that knowledge until her death and continued living with it in the nightmare afterward. The rakuyo appearing in her hands during the boss fight is not a continuity error. It is the nightmare's version of Maria, forced by the dream logic of the hunter's nightmare to fight with the weapon she abandoned, forced to be the hunter she tried not to be anymore. Even in death, even in her attempt to protect others from the truth of what she participated in, she cannot escape what she was. Here is a secret about hunter weapons that most players sense but cannot quite articulate. Every trick weapon in Bloodborne has two forms, and the transition between these forms is not just a mechanical choice, It is a philosophical statement. The threaded cane transforms from a walking stick, something a gentleman carries in polite society, into a whip, something used to inflict pain. This transformation tells you exactly what the hunters of Yharnam are doing when they walk through polite society. They are concealing what they are. The cane form is the mask, the whip is the face beneath it. Every time you transform a trick weapon, you are performing the same act that every hunter in Yharnam performs constantly, revealing what was always there underneath the more acceptable surface. The saw cleaver is the most common hunter weapon, the one the game suggests most strongly at the start, and its secret is in its design philosophy. It is not elegant, it is not ceremonial, it is purely, bluntly functional. The teeth that extend from the blade when transformed are designed specifically to tear through thick fur and hide, to maximize damage against beasts who have grown a protective coat as part of their transformation. Someone designed this weapon knowing exactly what it would be used against, knowing that the people it was designed to kill were once patients of the same institution that commissioned the weapon's creation. The saw cleaver is the healing church cleaning up its own mess with maximum efficiency and minimum sentimentality. Blood gems, those items you slot into weapons to enhance them, carry a secret in their origin. The most powerful blood gems come from the Chalice dungeons, from the depths of the Pthumerian ruins. What you're doing when you socket these gems into your weapons is incorporating the essence of an ancient civilization's relationship with the Great Ones into your modern hunting tools. The Pthumerians spent centuries developing these blood gems through rituals and communion with cosmic entities. You're using that accumulated ancient power to kill beasts on the streets of a Victorian city. The gap between the scale of what the gems represent and the mundane violence they are used for is one of Bloodborne's quietest ironies. The secret about Eileen the Crow is in the specific weight of her assignment. She hunts hunters, not beasts. Hunters who have become blood drunk, who have lost themselves to violence, who have crossed the line from necessary killing into killing for its own sake. This sounds like a noble purpose, and in some ways it is. But consider what it means in practice. Eileen spends every night of every hunt watching people she may have known, may have trained alongside, may have respected, cross that line, and then she kills them. She's not fighting strangers. She's ending the lives of people from her own community, repeatedly, because the community itself produces this outcome regularly enough to require a dedicated specialist. When she tells you to not become a hunter of hunters, she's not simply offering career advice. She's telling you that this work costs something that does not grow back. That watching your peers become monsters and killing them for it leaves marks that accumulate. She is telling you she is tired in a way that sleep cannot fix, and she does not want you to end up the same way. Here is a secret about the hunter's dream itself that the game conceals in plain sight. The dream is not simply a safe space between hunts. It is a carefully maintained illusion of normalcy. It looks like the old workshop because Gehrman built it to look that way, because the familiar environment of the place he worked and the people he respected is the anchor he chose for his captivity. He could not control where he was imprisoned. He could control how it looked. And he made it look like home. The flowers, the soft light, the tools hanging in the workshop, the books on the shelves, all of it, chosen by a man trying to make a cage feel like something other than a cage, and to some extent succeeding. The hunter's dream is beautiful precisely because the person who shaped it was trying so hard to find beauty in an inescapable situation. The Great Ones are the cosmic entities at the centre of Bloodborne's mythology, and their secrets are the deepest in the game. Most players understand them as bosses or as abstract forces, but the Great Ones, examined carefully, are individuals with their own histories and their own losses and their own incomprehensible forms of suffering. Here is a secret about the Great Ones that reframes almost everything about them. They're all grieving. Every single Great One you encounter in the game has lost something irreplaceable, and that loss is the engine of everything they do. Ebritus lost her kin, left behind in the Pthumerian depths while others ascended or departed. Rom the Vacuous Spider lost her mind in the process of becoming something greater. The Moon Presence lost some original purpose or companion that the game only hints at. The Wet Nurse exists entirely in service of protecting something that may not truly exist in any physical sense. And Uden, the formless Great One, endlessly seeks children it cannot carry because it has no physical form to carry them with. This universal grief is not accidental. It is the game's statement about the nature of the Great Ones and their relationship with humanity. They are not simply powerful. They are powerful and alone in a way that humanity, for all its suffering, is not quite. Humans grieve and find each other. Great Ones grieve in dimensions where no one else exists to offer comfort. The secret of Rom the Vacuous Spider is perhaps the most tragic of all the Great One's stories. Rom was a scholar at Byrgenwerth, a human being with a name and presumably a history and relationships and a sense of self. Master Willem elevated her, transformed her into a Great One through a process that the game only partially describes, and the transformation worked, in the sense that Rom genuinely became something greater than human, something with access to cosmic awareness and tremendous power. But it took everything from her in exchange: her personality, her memories, her will, her sense of self. The word vacuous in her title is not simply a descriptor of her current state. It is a record of what the transformation cost. She was full once. Whatever she became emptied her. She hides beneath the lake at Byrgenwerth, maintaining the veil of ignorance that conceals the true horror of Yharnam's situation from ordinary perception. When you kill Rom and shatter the veil, you're not causing the blood moon to appear. You're causing everyone to be able to see what was already there. The horror was always present. Rom was simply maintaining the mercy of ignorance for those not yet ready to perceive it. The secret about Murgo's wet nurse that most players miss is the nature of what she is protecting. Murgo, the infant Great One whose cries echo through the nightmare of Mensis, may not physically exist in any location. The crib is there, the cries are there. But there is no visible infant. The wet nurse is protecting an absence, a presence defined entirely by sound and by the space where something should be, but is not. Whether Murgo exists on a plane of reality that simply cannot be perceived directly, or whether Murgo is something more purely conceptual, the wet nurse guards with the same ferocity either way. The question of whether what she protects is real does not appear to affect her devotion to protecting it. Here is a secret about Uden that runs through the entire game almost invisibly. Uden is the formless Great One associated with blood and with the act of reproduction. He appears nowhere directly. He has no physical form whatsoever, but his influence is everywhere. The Eden Chapel, that sanctuary in the middle of the city where you send NPCs for safety, is dedicated to him, and Eden is responsible for more of the game's tragedy than most players realize. Ariana, the woman you can send to the chapel, is revealed at the end of the game to be carrying Eden's child despite having no physical relationship with anyone. When women receive enough old blood, enough of the essence that Eden permeates, he can act through that medium, Ariana gave birth to a celestial infant in the chapel, and the birth killed her. The child crawls away. Whedon, formless and uncaring, moves on. He does not grieve what his offspring costs their mothers. He may not be capable of understanding that there is something to grieve. The celestial emissaries, those pale blue humanoid creatures in the upper cathedral ward that most players simply fight as enemies, are children. They are the results of the choir's experiments on the orphans the church collected, subjected to cosmic exposure and surviving in a form that the choir considered successful. These transformed children wander the upper cathedral ward purposelessly, their original selves entirely erased, their new forms given to them without their consent by adults who believe they were doing something noble. They are not monsters, they are victims who have been transformed so completely that the victimization is no longer legible on their surface. The secret about Ebritus, daughter of the cosmos, that changes everything about her encounter is her posture when you find her. She is kneeling. Her massive form is bent toward the ground in a posture that reads unmistakably as grief or prayer. She is mourning when you find her. The most widely accepted interpretation is that she is mourning Rom, that the shape on the ground before her is Rom's body, or an echo of it, that these two great ones had a connection that Ebritus maintains even after Rom's departure to the lake at Byrgenwerth. She does not attack until you approach her. She's not lying in wait. She's not guarding anything. She's simply there, in her sadness, and you interrupt it. And the people who keep her, who built the altar of despair around her and call themselves her students, are using her sorrow as a resource. They study her. They extract knowledge from her. They have not considered that she might need something other than observers. Yharnam's locations carry their secrets in their architecture, in the things that are present and in the things that are conspicuously absent, in the details that reward the player who walks slowly and looks carefully. Here is a secret about central Yharnam that most players experience without consciously registering. The layout of the city is designed to make you feel watched. The buildings are close together, the streets are narrow, the gas lamps create pools of light surrounded by deeper darkness, and the windows of the surrounding buildings are at exactly the right height to contain faces looking down at you. The citizens of Yharnam who are still inside their homes during the hunt are watching the streets. They lock their doors and shutter their windows, and they watch through the gaps, and they know that the person the hunters are cleaning up might be their neighbour from yesterday. The paranoia that drives the mob is visible in the city's design. You're always being watched in Yharnam because watching from behind locked doors is how survival works in a city where anyone might transform at any time. The Forbidden Woods hold a secret in their name as much as their content. They are forbidden by the Healing Church, which means the Church knew what was in there and decided the best approach was restriction rather than disclosure. What is in there is the path to Byrgenwerth, and the village of the afflicted and the underground passage to the fishing hamlet. The Church forbade access to the woods, because the woods lead to the things the Church most needed people not to find. The name is an admission of guilt disguised as a safety warning. Here is a secret about Old Yharnam that most players feel emotionally but cannot quite place. Old Yharnam is a burned district. The beasts that still roam the charred ruins are the survivors or their descendants, transformed creatures living in the wreckage of what was once a thriving community. And Jura, the old hunter with the Gatling gun on the tower, chose to stay there, not because he could not leave, because he refused to. He watched the burning. He may have participated in it as a hunter before his conscience broke him, and he has spent the years since standing guard over the beasts he now sees as victims, driving away anyone who comes to hunt them further. The secret about Jura is what his presence says about the hunt as an institution. The hunt produces people like Jura, people who participate for years, and then, at some point, they often cannot precisely identify, realize that what they have been doing has not been heroic. The hunt has no mechanism for these people, no protocol for the hunter who has a crisis of conscience. You either keep hunting or you become a problem, an obstacle. Jura chose to become an obstacle. He is still there, old and furious, pointing his gun at anyone who comes to hurt what he has decided to protect. The secret of Cainhurst Castle that most players sense in the atmosphere but rarely articulate is how recent its tragedy is by the standards of Yharnam's long history. Cainhurst feels ancient, frozen, preserved in its moment of catastrophe. But the execution carried out by Logarius and his executioners was not that long ago in narrative terms. The bodies are still there. The Queen is still alive in her sealed throne room. This is not ancient history. This is a war crime that happened within living memory, and the perpetrator is still at the top of the castle, keeping his post, ensuring that no one reaches the survivor he was sent to contain. Logarius himself is one of the game's most quietly horrifying figures. He arrived at Cainhurst, killed everyone he found, sealed the throne room and sat down on the roof and waited for an order that was never rescinded because the people who would rescind it are long dead. He became what the game calls a martyr, not in the sense of someone who died for a cause, but in the sense of someone who suffered endlessly for one. His body decayed around his conviction, his flesh rotted away, his armor rusted, but his will persisted beyond the point where any human will should have been able to. When you fight him, you are fighting something that is still in whatever remains of its consciousness, following orders. Long after the orders stopped making sense, long after everyone who gave them is dead. The research hall secret is one of the most disturbing in the game, and one that requires reading the environment rather than the dialogue to fully understand. The patients are in agony, suspended from the ceiling or clutching their heads in distress that has no words, and the thing that was done to them was done by people who believed they were helping. The church physicians were trying to grant these patients eyes on the inside, cosmic awareness, the insight that would allow them to perceive the Great Ones. The patients reached the stage where they could hear things, could perceive things at the edges of the normal perception, and it was agonizing. The expansion of consciousness that the church believed was a gift felt from inside, like being torn apart. What the church read as successful progress, the patients were experiencing as torture. Here is a secret about the nightmare of Mensis that most players miss entirely because they are too focused on surviving it. The architecture of the nightmare is impossible. The geometry defies physics. Rooms connect to other rooms in ways that cannot be true if space is consistent. This is not a design limitation or a deliberate artistic choice for aesthetic effect. It is the physical expression of broken minds. The school of Mensis scholars who performed the ritual and had their consciousness destroyed by contact with Mergo built this nightmare from their own shattered psyches. The impossible architecture is impossible because the minds that generated it were no longer capable of constructing consistent space. You're not moving through a building. You're moving through the internal landscape of people whose sanity was destroyed by cosmic contact. Every impossible corner and every room that should not connect to the room it connects to is a symptom of the damage done to real human beings who wanted too much too fast. The Chalice dungeons are the most overlooked major content in all of Bloodborne, and they are also where the game's deepest secrets are buried. Most players dip into them for the items and the blood gems and then abandon them. But the dungeons are not optional content in a narrative sense. They are the foundation of everything, the oldest layer of the game's world, the place where the story actually began. Here is the secret about the Chalice dungeons that changes how you think about the entire game. They are not ruins in the way that most ruins are ruins. The Pthumerian labyrinths are still actively maintained by people who no longer understand why they are maintaining them. The Pthumerian descendant enemies you fight in the dungeons, those tall, pale warriors in ceremonial armour, are still doing their jobs, still patrolling, still performing rituals whose meaning was lost generations ago. They are the institutional memory of a civilization given physical form, continuing to function long after the civilization it served dissolved. They are what institutions become when the original purpose is forgotten, but the structure remains, all habit and no understanding. The secret of Queen Yharnam, the boss of the Pthumeru Hill Root Chalice, is connected directly to the surface game in ways that most players who encounter her do not realise. Queen Yharnam is the origin of the city's name. Yharnam the city was named after her. This ancient queen, this figure from the deepest Pthumerian civilization, gave her name to a Victorian Gothic metropolis built unknowingly on top of her tomb, and she appears at specific points in the game on the surface as a vision, a ghost, a figure glimpsed in moments of cosmic significance. She watches. She does not intervene. She's been watching, from whatever plane she currently inhabits, as civilization after civilization repeats the mistakes that destroyed hers. The Pthumerian queen was chosen by the Great Ones for a specific and terrible purpose. She was selected to carry a Great One's child. The Great One's child she carried was Mergo. This means that the ritual of Mensis was not simply an attempt to contact an arbitrary Great One. It was an attempt to contact a being with a specific and ancient connection to the Pthumerian royal lineage. Mergo is not a randomly chosen cosmic entity. Mergo is, in some sense, an heir, a child of the oldest and most direct communion between humanity and the Great Ones. The School of Mensis reached for the most significant contact they could find, and they paid accordingly. Here is a secret about the Watchers of the Old Lords, those massive flaming beasts that guard certain Chalice dungeon bosses. Their fire is not simply a gameplay mechanic, it is a remnant of the same flame that destroyed old Yharnam. The Pthumerian civilization also had an outbreak of the Beast Plague, also attempted to contain it through fire, also discovered that fire could not solve what blood had caused. The Watchers carry that fire forward across thousands of years. They are living evidence that the cycle of blood and beasts and flame has been running longer than anyone in the surface world knows. The burning of old Yharnam was not an unprecedented act of desperation. It was a repetition, something the Pthumerians had already tried, something that had already failed once before. The Hunter's Nightmare is not simply a dark mirror of the waking world. It is a specific and deliberately constructed place of punishment, and understanding its architecture reveals secrets about the nature of guilt and consequence in Bloodborne's universe. Here is the secret about who the Hunter's Nightmare is actually for. Most players assume it is a general purgatory for blood-drunk hunters. And it is that, but it is specifically and originally the punishment created by Kos for the hunters who participated in the massacre of the fishing hamlet. The nightmare was built around a specific atrocity. Kos, dying or dead on the shore of the hamlet, laid a curse on the hunters who had violated her and her people. The nightmare is the shape of that curse given physical form. Every hunter who ends up there is forced into a recreation of the crime that created it. The hunters of the hamlet are made to participate in a recreation of their atrocity indefinitely, with no escape and no resolution. The secret about Simon the Harrowed is his relationship to the original massacre. Simon was not present at the fishing hamlet atrocity. He is not one of the hunters being punished. He came to the nightmare voluntarily, driven by his own investigations into what happened there. He carries a bow blade, a weapon designed for distance, and this weapon choice says something about who Simon is. He is an observer, a recorder. He wants to understand what happened without becoming part of it. He enters the nightmare carrying his distance as a weapon and his curiosity as a motivation, and the nightmare has kept him there longer than he intended, because the truth he came looking for keeps revealing new depths. His questline ends with him giving you the bowblade and asking you to kill the orphan of Kos. What he wants is an ending, not justice, because justice for what happened at the hamlet is not available, but a conclusion, something that says the story has been told and can now be finished. Here is a secret about Ludwig the Holy Blade that most players encounter, but do not fully register. When you cut off his lower half during the boss fight and he drags himself toward you with only his arms, he calls out, not to attack, to ask. He asks if you are a hunter of the church. He is, in that moment, not a boss. He is a person in agony looking for a familiar face in a nightmare. And then, when the fight is over, you can show him the holy moonlight sword. His sword. And for a moment he becomes lucid. He remembers. He asks if he fought well. He wants to know in the last moment before his death that he was not simply a monster. That somewhere under everything the nightmare made him, there was still the hunter he used to be. The fact that the game gives you this choice, the choice to show him the sword and give him that moment of clarity, or to withhold it and deny him that, is one of the most precise and deliberate moral decisions in the game. You can give Ludwig a good death or a confused one. The game does not tell you which is kinder, it trusts you to decide. The Orphan of Kos is the final secret of the nightmare, and arguably the final secret of the entire game. It is a being born from a dead mother, emerging from a corpse that has been violated and studied and used as raw material by people who saw it as a resource rather than a person. The orphan's first action upon emerging is to scream, not to attack, to scream with a grief and a rage that has no words, that needs no words, that communicates everything about its situation without requiring language. It then picks up what is implied to be its own placental sac and uses it as a weapon. The orphan fights with the evidence of its own traumatic birth. It makes a weapon of the circumstances of its arrival in a world that was already cruel to it before it was fully present in it. When you kill the orphan, the nightmare begins to dissolve. The curse of Kos is lifted, or at least altered, and a sound plays that has been interpreted many ways by many players. A voice that sounds like it might be Kos, or might be the orphan, or might be both, offering something that might be a blessing, or might simply be the sound of a thing finally finished. The ambiguity is deliberate. Kos's curse was never going to end cleanly. The best that was available was an ending, and you provided it. The NPCs of Bloodborne carry their secrets in what they do not say as much as in what they do. They are people navigating a catastrophe with incomplete information, making decisions that seem reasonable from where they stand and often catastrophic from any other angle. Here is a secret about the plain doll that most players sense but cannot quite name. She is the most consistently kind presence in the game. every hunter who has ever come through the dream has been tended by her. She has watched countless hunters arrive full of determination and leave having accomplished nothing, return again, leave again, return again, until eventually they stopped returning. She's watched this cycle repeat for as long as the dream has existed, and she remains warm, remains gentle, remains genuinely glad to see each hunter who arrives. This secret is what this continuity of care costs. The doll cannot leave the dream, cannot rest, cannot pursue any purpose of her own. She exists entirely in service of hunters who cycle through her care and then are gone. She is, in the most precise sense, a caretaker without anyone permanent to care for. And yet, she does not seem broken by this. When she speaks of being glad that hunters exist to give her purpose, there is something in her voice that sounds less like resignation and more like a choice. She has chosen to find meaning in what she has rather than grief in what she lacks. Here is a secret about Ariana that changes her entire presence in the game. She's descendant of Cainhurst. The blue dress she wears, the specific shade of it, is the colour associated with Cainhurst nobility. Her blood, when she gives it to you, has properties associated with Cainhurst blood. She is a member of a lineage that the Healing Church massacred, living in the city the Church controls, working in a profession that the Church's social order pushed her into by cutting her off from the nobility she should have inherited. She is not simply a woman of pleasure who happens to have useful blood. She is a survivor of an aristocratic genocide, stripped of her birthright, surviving in the margins of a society that destroyed her family. She gives you her blood because it helps, and because helping is what she has left. The secret about the suspicious beggar is in the timing. He arrives in Yharnam the same night you do. He's a beast in the early stages of transformation, clever enough to control himself and maintain a human appearance, using the chaos of the hunter's cover. He kills the NPCs you send to safe locations if you send him there with them. He is not a fellow traveller. He is a predator who has learned to use the language of vulnerability to gain access to prey. Eileen the Crow's secret is in what happens if you fail her questline. If you reach certain areas too late, you find her dying. Not dead. Dying. She's been fighting Henrik, a blood-drunk hunter she was sent to kill, and the victory cost her everything. She is lying on the ground and she gives you her crow badge and tells you to take her place. She is not asking. She's transferring a duty she can no longer carry to the only person available. Even dying in an alley in Yharnam, she's thinking about the next blood-drunk hunter who will need to be stopped rather than about herself. Here is a secret about Mikolash, host of the Nightmare, that most players find amusing but rarely examine seriously. He runs from you in his boss fight, and the reason he runs is not simply cowardice. He is still capable of being afraid of something, which means he is still, in whatever fractured form the nightmare has left him, experiencing something like consciousness. When you finally corner him and fight him, his attacks are erratic and his dialogue cycles without building toward any coherent thought. He achieved exactly what he sought. He made contact with a great one. He received insight beyond human comprehension, and it left him unable to construct a complete sentence. The joke of the Mikolash fight is also its tragedy. This is what success looks like when success means opening your mind to something your mind was not built to contain. The secret about Gehrman that most players only discover on their third or fourth playthrough is in the things he says when he thinks you cannot hear him, his sleep-talking, his muttered words from the wheelchair. He calls out to Lawrence, to Master Willem. He asks to be unshackled. He says he has had enough of the dream. These Words are not atmospheric decoration. They are the most honest thing Gehrman says in the entire game. In his waking interactions with you, he is composed, helpful, mentally. In his sleep he reveals the desperation underneath, the captivity that the waking performance conceals, the man behind the mentor, the prisoner behind the guide. Bloodborne has 3 endings, and each one contains a secret that most analyses of the game overlook in favour of describing what happens mechanically. These secrets are not in what you do, they are in what the endings reveal about what you are. The first ending, the Yharnam Sunrise, feels like a release. Gehrman offers to free you from the dream and you accept, and he kills you mercifully, and you wake to morning in Yharnam. The hunt is over. The night is done. You survived. But here is the secret of this ending. You did not escape. You surrendered. You accepted the terms of a contract you never agreed to, submitted to being killed by your jailer, and woke up in the city that hired you. The dream continues. Gehrman returns to his wheelchair. The next hunter will arrive. Everything you experienced, every secret you uncovered, every horror you faced is simply erased. The doll kneels at what is implied to be your grave and says farewell, and the word farewell lands differently when you understand that from her perspective, this has happened many times before and will happen many times again. The second ending, where you refuse Gehrman and fight him, feels like rebellion. You defeat your jailer, you refuse to be killed on his terms, and then the moon presence descends and embraces you, and you become the new host of the dream. The secret of this ending is that you did not escape the system. You became it. You fought the prison guard and won, and the prison promoted you. The dream needed a host. It has one. The cycle continues with you in Gehrman's chair, and some future hunter will arrive, and you will guide them the way Gehrman guided you. And eventually they too will either submit or replace you. The rebellion achieved nothing except a change of personnel. The third ending, where you consume the 3 umbilical cords and fight the moon presence and become an infant great one, is the most ambiguous and the most discussed. Here is its secret. The doll picks you up. She cradles you. She speaks with maternal warmth to something that was, moments ago, a hunter capable of killing gods. You have transcended. You have become something genuinely new. But you are helpless. You are dependent. You are, in the most literal sense, beginning again. Whether this is liberation, or simply a different form of captivity, is something the game refuses to answer. You broke the cycle. But what you broke it into is unknown. The dawn of a new age, or simply a new age of the same fundamental dynamic between the human and the cosmic, remains completely open. The secret that connects all 3 endings is the doll. She is present in all of them. She tends to your grave in the first. She tends to Gehrman in the second, now that you have taken his place. She cradles you in the third. She is the constant, the through line, the one element of the dream that persists regardless of which choice you make. And what she feels about the different outcomes, whether she grieves for you in the first, whether she grieves for Gehrman in the second, whether she feels something like joy in the third, is something the game communicates only in the texture of her voice. She does not explain herself. She simply tends to whoever needs tending, with the same gentle warmth she has always offered, because that is what she is and what she has chosen to be, and perhaps those 2 things are for her the same. We have been through the Healing Church's tiered lies, through Gehrman's beautiful and terrible cage, through Maria's guilt and the fishing hamlet's unforgiven crime, through the Pthumerian ruins and the nightmare and the great ones, and the NPCs who navigate all of it with incomplete maps and broken compasses. And we have arrived, as we always arrive in Yharnam, at the question underneath all the other questions. What does it mean? The secrets of Bloodborne, taken together, are not random details. They form a coherent picture of something the game cares about deeply. Institutions that conceal the cost of their power from the people who pay it. Knowledge that arrives faster than the wisdom to use it responsibly. People who participate in systems they did not design and cannot fully understand, doing damage they cannot fully perceive, and eventually confronting the consequences in forms they did not anticipate. The Healing Church is not a story about evil people doing evil things. It is a story about an institution that began with a genuine desire to help, developed a power structure around that desire, and then found itself defending the power structure at the expense of the original desire. By the time the church is burning old Yharnam, it has long since stopped being about healing. But everyone inside it still uses the language of healing, still believes at some level that this is what they are doing. The gap between the language and the reality is where the horror lives. The Hunters are not a story about brave warriors failing to stop an unstoppable evil. They are a story about people who were given a job that required them to become increasingly violent, and were not given the support or the framework to process what that violence was doing to them. They become blood drunk not because they are weak or wicked, but because the work they were given demands more from the human psyche than the human psyche can consistently sustain. The institution failed them before the blood did, and the Great Ones, those cosmic entities that seem so far from anything human that they should be beyond sympathy, are ultimately a story about grief and connection and the impossibility of genuine understanding across vast differences of scale and experience. They reach toward humanity not out of cruelty, but out of loneliness. They cause devastation not out of malice, but out of indifference so vast it amounts to the same thing in practice. Bloodborne hides its secrets, because the world it depicts is a world that runs on secrets, that requires them, that would collapse without them. The moment the population of Yharnam fully understands what blood ministration actually is, the entire order the church maintains becomes impossible. The secret is load-bearing. It holds up the roof. This is why Yharnam feels so claustrophobic, so dense, so suffocating in its atmosphere. It is a city where the architecture is not just physical, but built from what people do not know and must not know. And every secret you find is a small act of demolition. You can know all of this and still love Yharnam. You can know all of this and understand why the people inside it made the choices they made, why the Hunters hunted and the church concealed and the Great Ones reached, and the ordinary citizens locked their doors and prayed. You can know all of this and grieve for everyone in it, even the ones who cause the most damage, because understanding something fully means understanding how it was possible for real people to participate in it. That is what Bloodborne's secrets ultimately are, not revelations that simplify the world into villains and victims. Revelations that complicate it, that add layers to every character you thought you understood, that make the tragedy more complete and more specific and more achingly recognizable. There is a category of Bloodborne's secret that is more difficult to discuss than the hidden lore or the buried connections. It is the secrets that are not hidden at all, the things the game puts directly in front of you, in the first hour, in the most visited areas, in the most familiar interactions that most players still manage to miss because the game trusts you to notice them and does not point at them. The first of these is the blood. Not the blood ministration, Not the old blood, not the Great One's blood. The blood on everything. The streets of central Yharnam are wet with it. The buildings are stained with it. The lampposts are splattered. The cobblestones are dark with it in the flickering light. This is not the blood of tonight's hunt. Yharnam is this soaked because every night is hunt night. Every night has been hunt night for longer than anyone currently alive in the city can clearly remember. The blood on the streets is not fresh. It is accumulated. It is the geological record of a city that has been consuming itself for generations, layer upon layer, hunt upon hunt, until the blood is simply part of the landscape, part of the architecture. You walk on it without thinking about it because it has always been there. Here is a secret about the lamps. The gas lamps of Yharnam are one of the game's most iconic visual elements, and they carry a secret that most players sense as atmosphere without identifying as information. The lamps are maintained. During a night of the hunt, when the streets are full of transformed citizens and rampaging beasts and desperate hunters, someone is still maintaining the lamps. Someone is still filling them with gas, still lighting them, still ensuring that the city is illuminated for the hunters who need to see. This maintenance is invisible because it happens between hunts in the daylight hours that the game never shows you. But it implies a population of workers who go out every day into streets they know will be covered in blood by nightfall and do their jobs anyway. The mundane infrastructure of a city at permanent war with itself requires people willing to maintain it, and those people are never named or shown or acknowledged. They are simply the reason you can see. The second secret hidden in plain sight is the health of the enemies in the early game. The central Yharnam enemies, those torch-wielding villagers who call out warnings and pray and occasionally vomit blood, are not strong. A player who understands the combat can dispatch them with minimal difficulty. But they were not always this weak. They were once people with the full physical capability of adults in reasonable health. The reason they are weakened, the reason many of them are hunched and slow and less dangerous than they should be, is that the blood ministration they have received over years has begun its transformative work. They are in the early stages of changing, not yet beasts, not quite human anymore. They are in the terrible middle space between what they were and what they are becoming, and that in-between space has left them diminished in ways they cannot perceive, because the perception itself is changing along with everything else. Here is a secret about the chalices themselves, those ritual cups used in Pthumerian ceremonies and found throughout the game as items you use to generate dungeon content. They are not simply containers, they are records. The specific materials used to construct different chalices, the specific rituals required to use them, the specific depths of labyrinth they unlock. All of this information is encoded in the chalice itself. Each chalice is a preserved set of instructions for accessing specific parts of the Pthumerian ruins, maintained over thousands of years by people who increasingly did not understand what they were maintaining, but continued to maintain it because the instructions said to. The chalices are the most concrete example in the game of institutional memory outlasting institutional understanding. They work, they open the dungeons, they do exactly what they were designed to do. And almost no one alive has any idea why they were designed to do it. The Forbidden Knowledge rune, one of the Carol runes you can find in the game, grants a significant boost to your insight stat. Insight is the currency of cosmic awareness, the measure of how much contact with the Great Ones your mind has had and survived. The Forbidden Knowledge rune says that you have access to information that is classified, that has been restricted, that someone decided you should not have. But the rune does not specify who made this decision or what exactly the knowledge is. It simply notes that it is forbidden and that having it increases your awareness of cosmic truth. This is the game at its most distilled. Knowledge is forbidden. Having it anyway makes you more capable of perceiving reality. The people who classified it were protecting something, possibly themselves, possibly the system, possibly you from a truth you could not handle. The rune does not take a position on whether the prohibition was wise or whether violating it was the right choice. It simply gives you the insight and lets you decide. The secret about the amygdalas that cling to buildings throughout Cathedral Ward and the surrounding areas is one of the most celebrated reveals in the game, but its full implications are worth dwelling on slowly. When you first arrive in Cathedral Ward, the amygdalas are invisible. The area seems relatively normal by Yharnam standards. As your insight increases, they become visible. These enormous spider-like great ones, each one larger than a building, have been clinging to the cathedral and the surrounding structures the entire time. They were present when you arrived. They will be present when you leave. They do not attack unless you approach them. They're simply watching. Dozens of them, distributed across the architecture of the church's most sacred district, watching the humans below go about their lives. What does it mean that the healing church's most sacred district is draped in the bodies of great ones? The most troubling interpretation is that the church knows they are there and has accepted their presence as a sign of divine favour. That the amygdala's vigil over Cathedral Ward is understood by the church's upper echelons as confirmation that their project, their grand multi-generational experiment in cosmic communion, is proceeding correctly. That the Great Ones are watching because they are interested, and their interest is the closest thing to approval that entities of their scale can express. The cathedral is not simply a building where people worship. It is a building that is itself worshipped from above by beings that cannot be comprehended for reasons that remain completely unclear. We have spent a long time in Yharnam's streets and buildings and nightmares, and there is one more subject worth examining before we rest. Blood itself. Not as a mechanic or a resource or a metaphor. Blood as the central secret of the game, the thing that everything else is trying to understand or control or escape. Here is a secret about blood in Bloodborne that requires stepping back from the specific details and looking at the shape of the whole. Every faction in the game has a different relationship with blood, and those different relationships define them more completely than anything else about them. The Healing Church uses blood as medicine. The Cainhurst nobility uses it as a weapon and a status symbol. The choir uses it as a sacrament. The School of Mensis uses it as a communication medium. The Great Ones exist through it, or in it, or as it, and the hunters use it to heal themselves from the wounds of fighting against all of these things. Blood is simultaneously the problem and the solution in Yharnam. The old blood causes the scourge of beasts. Blood vials heal the wounds sustained fighting those beasts. The blood of specific Great Ones is what the choir seeks to distill. Blood gems enhance the weapons used to fight the transformed. The blood echoes that serve as currency in the game are literally the lingering power of beings who have bled, who have died, who have left something of themselves in their blood that can be harvested and used by whoever comes next. Nothing in Yharnam is free of blood. Nothing in Yharnam is uncontaminated by it. This city is not simply soaked in it on its streets. It is soaked in it at the level of its institutions, its culture, its religion, its economy, its entire way of organizing human life. The secret of blood in Bloodborne is not a revelation that can be stated simply. It is a question the game poses through its entire world and never quite answers. What is the relationship between the physical and the metaphysical? Between the substance that moves through living bodies and the cosmic forces that those bodies are trying to access? Is blood simply a carrier, a convenient medium that the Great Ones use because it is present in all living things and therefore accessible? Or is there something about blood itself, something in its nature as the substance of life that makes it genuinely magical? The game suggests the second without confirming it. Blood remembers, blood carries, blood connects. The old blood in particular seems to contain something that cannot be reduced to chemistry, something that persists across time and transformation and death. Whether this is a property of the Great One's influence or a property of blood itself is a question that the Healing Church spent generations trying to answer and never successfully did. Here is the final secret of Bloodborne, the one that everything else is a version of. The game is about the cost of reaching for something beyond your understanding. Every character who comes into contact with the Great Ones pays a price. Willem loses his student and his mind. Lawrence loses himself to the beast. The school of Mensis loses their sanity to the thing they called. Maria loses her peace to the act of serving the people who reached. Ariana loses her life to bearing the child she never agreed to carry. Gehrman loses his freedom to the bargain he made. And the player, the hunter, whatever they are and wherever they came from, risks losing their humanity to the accumulation of insight that makes them capable of doing what the game asks them to do. The secret is not that reaching is wrong. The game does not take that position cleanly. It presents reaching as dangerous and costly and often catastrophic, and also as the thing that makes progress possible. Rom's transformation was terrible and also real. She became something greater, even if what she became was also something emptied. The third ending, the Infant Great One ending, is horrifying and also transcendent. Something new exists that did not exist before, and whether that newness is worth the cost of the humanity it replaced is something the game will not decide for you. This is the deepest secret of Yharnam, buried under all the other secrets, visible only when you have uncovered enough of the rest to see the shape of the whole. The city is not a warning about ambition. It is a record of what ambition costs and a refusal to tell you whether the cost was worth it. That question is yours. The game gives you the evidence and the experience and the endings and the details, and then it steps back and waits. What do you think? Was it worth it? Is knowing worth what knowing costs? Is reaching worth what reaching breaks? Yharnam does not answer. It simply shows you what happened to everyone who asked the same question before you, and it trusts that you are wise enough, or brave enough, or perhaps simply curious enough to form your own answer. Every weapon in Bloodborne carries a story that most players experience only as statistics: attack power, scaling, moveset. But the weapons of Yharnam are artifacts, and like all artifacts, they contain within them the history of the hands that made them and the hands that used them, and the specific problems they were designed to solve. The burial blade is Gehrman's weapon, a large curved scythe that folds into a smaller curved blade, designed by the first hunter for the use of the first hunter. Its design is practical in a specific way that reveals something about what Gehrman understood when he was still making things. The scythe form is for sweeping attacks, for clearing multiple opponents or striking fast-moving targets at range. The shorter blade form is for precision, for the moments when the situation requires accuracy over coverage. The transformation between the two is fast, designed to happen mid-combat, because Gehrman understood that any fight that lasts long enough will change its nature. The weapon encodes his philosophy: be adaptable, be prepared for the fight to become something different than it was. The burial blade is not just his weapon, it is his understanding of hunting given an edge. The threaded cane's secret is in its social dimension. It was designed for a specific kind of hunter, one who needed to move through Yharnam's upper society without advertising their profession. The cane form is socially legible, respectable, appropriate for a gentleman or a woman of means to carry in public. The whip form is effective against the kind of creature you encounter at night in the streets of that same society. The weapon was built for a hunter who had to be two things at once: presentable and lethal, visible and concealed, and the trick mechanism that switches between forms is less a clever engineering solution and more a social survival tool. In a city where the hunt is both necessary and disreputable, where everyone knows it happens and everyone pretends it does not, the threaded cane is the physical manifestation of that collective pretense. The shikar carries a secret in its costs. It is the Canehurst weapon, the blade associated with the vile blood arts, and using it in its transformed state drains your health continuously. This is not a game-balanced decision imposed from outside the fiction. Within the fiction, the shikar drains health, because the vile blood arts require the user's own blood as a reagent. You're not simply wielding a sword, you are spending yourself. The Canehurst philosophy of beauty being worth dying for is embedded in the weapon's mechanics. Every moment you spend with the shikars transformed is a moment you are paying with your own life for the power it provides. The weapon demands the same sacrifice from you that the philosophy it represents demanded from everyone who embraced it. And the Canehurst nobility, the beautiful corpses that still inhabit that frozen castle, were willing to make that trade. Whether you are is a question the weapon asks with every tick of draining health. Ludwig's holy blade carries two secrets, one in each of its forms. The one-handed form is a straight sword, practical, efficient, well-balanced, the weapon of a hunter who needs to be effective rather than impressive. The two-handed form is something else entirely. A massive flat blade that functions as a blunt object as much as a cutting implement. Heavy, slow, devastating. The transition between the two forms is the transition between the hunter, Ludwig was, and the paladin he became. He started pragmatic and ended zealous, and the weapon captures both stages of that journey in its transformation. The holy moonlight that infuses the large form in its powered attacks is not simply an elemental property. It is, within the game's fiction, the last genuine light associated with a great one whose influence was genuinely benevolent, or at least not actively harmful. In a game full of cosmic entities whose attention brings catastrophe, the moonlight of this sword is something quieter, something that seems to suggest that not all contact with the Great Ones leads to ruin, that some of it leaves something beautiful behind, even after everything else is gone. The Kos parasite is the weapon that most directly expresses what Bloodborne is ultimately about. It is not a weapon you wield so much as a weapon you become a vehicle for. The parasite from Kos that you can use as an arm-mounted tool does not simply attack enemies. It transforms the attacks based on your insight level, becoming more powerful and more alien as your cosmic awareness increases. At maximum insight, the attacks are no longer legible as physical strikes. They have become something else, something that operates on a plane of reality that normal combat does not access. You have not mastered the parasite, you have become useful to it. The relationship between you and the weapon has inverted, and you only realize this gradually, as the moves become more powerful and less comprehensible, as you find yourself doing things that you did not consciously decide to do. The Rosmarinus and the Flame Sprayer, the arcane and fire weapons that work differently from everything else in the game, carry a secret in their pairing. Fire is the old solution, the human solution. When the Scourge got bad in old Yharnam, they used fire. When the Pthumerians faced the Beast Plague, they used fire. Fire is the oldest human response to the monster, the thing that drives away the darkness that cannot be fought conventionally. The arcane sprayer is the newer solution, the church solution, the attempt to fight cosmic horror with cosmic power, to meet the Great Ones on their own terms with energies derived from their own essence. Neither solution works completely. Neither fire nor arcane force solves the Scourge, but the existence of both, side by side, as tools available to the hunter, says something about the range of options that have been tried in this city's long and exhausted attempt to save itself. The amygdalan arm is perhaps the most honest weapon in the game about what it is. It is literally a severed limb of a Great One, repurposed as a bludgeon. You hit things with a piece of a cosmic entity. You use the body of an incomprehensible being as a club. The weapon is grotesque, and also completely on theme for a game about what happens when humanity cannot stop itself from reaching into spaces it does not understand and grabbing whatever is in reach. The amygdalan arm is the result of someone thinking, faced with an incomprehensible limb of a cosmic entity, not what does this mean or what is the appropriate response to this, but I wonder if I can hit things with it. This is, in microcosm, the Healing Church's entire relationship with the Great Ones. Faced with something vast and alien and beyond comprehension, ask only, how can I use this? Bloodborne's score is one of the most carefully constructed in gaming history, and its secrets are audible to anyone who listens with the right attention. Not musical theory, not technical analysis, simply listening to what the music is saying rather than simply experiencing it as atmosphere. The boss theme of Father Gascoigne begins with what sounds like a children's music box melody. Simple, tinkling, the kind of tune you might use to send a child to sleep. And then the orchestra comes in and transforms that melody into something massive and terrible. The small tune now embedded in a much larger and much darker context. This is not simply dramatic contrast for effect. It is the story of Father Gascoigne in 3 minutes of music. The man who had a family, who had daughters, who had a life built around small and gentle things, consumed by something so much larger and darker than himself that the original melody can barely be heard anymore. When you play the music box in his fight, that tiny tinkling tune, and he stops for a moment, that is the moment the game shows you that the original melody is still in there, still playing underneath everything the beast has overlaid. He hears it, he remembers. It is not enough to save him, but it is enough to prove that there was someone worth saving. The theme of Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos, is the most beautiful piece of music in the game, and it is playing during a boss fight. This is not accidental. Ebrietas is kneeling in grief when you find her. She does not attack until you approach. Her music should, by genre convention, be threatening or ominous or dramatic. Instead, it is achingly beautiful, full of voices that seem to be singing something too complex to follow, something that resolves just before you can grasp it. The music is the game telling you, as clearly as it can without words, that what you are fighting is not a monster. It is a mourning. It is loss expressed at a scale so large that it sounds like music rather than grief. When you kill her, you are ending something beautiful. The game knows this and tells you through the score. What you do with that knowledge is, as always, yours to decide. The ambient music of the hunter's dream changes depending on the time in the game's progression. In the early hours, it is melancholy but calm. As the blood moon rises, as the nightmare deepens, it becomes more urgent, more dissonant. The familiar elements of the early theme now distorted by something wrong. This progression mirrors what is happening to Yharnam itself. The dream is responding to the deteriorating situation in the waking world. The connection between the dream and reality is not simply narrative, it is musical. The score tells you that these two places are not separate, that what happens in one echoes in the other, that the peace of the early dream was always contingent on a situation in the waking world that was never as stable as it appeared. The silence in Bloodborne is also music, or at least deserves the same attention. There are moments in the game where the ambient score drops away entirely, where the only sounds are your footsteps and the distant cries and the wind. These silences are the most carefully placed audio in the game. They occur at moments of maximum horror. At the base of the healing church when you first see how deep the roots go. At the shore of the fishing hamlet when the scale of what happened there first becomes fully legible. At the moment the Orphan of Kos first screams, the game removes the music because some things do not have a soundtrack. Some things are too specific, too real, too precisely wrong to be accompanied by anything. The silence says, this is not atmosphere. This is the thing itself. The deepest secrets of Bloodborne are not things that the game reveals. They are things the game never says, that exist only in the space between what is shown and what is not, in the questions the game raises and declines to answer, in the characters who speak carefully and the characters who do not speak at all. Master Willem never explains what he was trying to achieve with his experiments on the patients at Byrgenwerth, the ones with the swollen heads and the eyes that have expanded beyond their skulls. He points at the lake. He mutters. He's been reduced to something that can barely communicate, whether by his experiments, or by his age, or by the weight of having been right about everything for so long that being right no longer provides any comfort. What was he trying to do? Grant them insight, yes. But to what end? What was Willem's vision for a humanity elevated through understanding rather than through blood? The game never tells you. The alternative to Lawrence's catastrophic blood ministration is never fully articulated because the person who embodied that alternative has been reduced to gestures and fragments. We know what the Church's version of transcendence looked like. We never fully know what Willem's would have. The doll never explains what she experiences. She speaks of being glad when hunters visit, of finding purpose in their care, of the warmth she tries to give. But whether she experiences anything, whether there is something it is like to be the plain doll, whether the warmth she gives creates any corresponding internal state, she never addresses directly. She is circumspect in a way that suggests either that she does not know the answer, or that she has decided not to share it, and the game does not distinguish between these possibilities. She might be a deeply feeling being who has learned to keep her inner life private. She might be a sophisticated mechanism that produces appropriate outputs without any corresponding subjective experience. The silence on this question is the most haunting silence in the game, because it is the silence around the question of whether kindness requires a subject to be kind, whether care requires a carer, or whether the function is real regardless of what underlies it. Kos never speaks. She is dead or dying when you encounter her physical form, a massive creature on the shore of the hamlet that has already been violated beyond any hope of communication. You cannot ask her what she felt about the villagers who worshipped her. You cannot ask her what the relationship meant from her side. You cannot ask her what she wanted for her child, or what she hoped when the scholars found her, or what the curse she laid was intended to accomplish. You know only the effect. The shape of her grief given the form of a nightmare. The specificity of a punishment that recreates exactly the crime it is punishing. Kos communicates only through consequences, because she was denied the opportunity to communicate in any other way. Her secrets are the secrets of someone who was not given the chance to speak, who was used and violated, and whose response to that violation is the only statement she ever got to make. And the moon presence, that pale thing that descends at the end, that entity that sustained the hunter's dream and bound Gehrman to it and selected you specifically for this hunt. What does it want? Why this city? Why this night? Why these hunters? The game gives you no answer that satisfies. You can fight it in the third ending and defeat it, and even in defeat it does not explain itself. It doesn't reveal its purpose or its history or its relationship to the other Great Ones or its investment in Murgo's death. It simply fights and fails and is gone. The biggest secret in Bloodborne is the moon presence's motivation, and the game withholds it completely. Not because it does not have an answer, but because the answer, if there is one, exists on a plane of reality that the game has spent its entire length demonstrating cannot be fully accessed by human minds, even yours, even now. This is the final lesson of Yharnam's secrets. Understanding is not total. The world contains things that cannot be fully known, that resist even the most patient and the most careful attention, that recede as you approach. The hunt for Bloodborne's secrets is the hunt for something that does not fully exist yet, that is still being made by the people who love this world and return to it and find new things every time. The secrets are not finite, they are generative. Each one you find opens the possibility of another you've not found yet, and that endless generation, that sense that there is always more, always another layer, always something you missed, is not a flaw. It is the deepest truth the game contains about the nature of things that are genuinely worth knowing. We have spoken about the Chalice dungeons in general terms, but the Pthumerians themselves deserve a longer and more careful examination, because they are the ghost beneath everything else in Bloodborne's world. They are the civilization that proves that Yharnam is not a tragedy. It is a repeat. The Pthumerians were not simply an ancient people who lived underground and worshipped Great Ones. They were the template, the original version of everything the Healing Church would later attempt. They had blood ministration long before Lawrence was born. They had chalice rituals. They had communion with the Great Ones. They had queens who carried cosmic children. They had beast plagues that they tried to contain with fire. They had everything the Surface City later developed thousands of years earlier, and they were destroyed by it just as completely. This repetition is the game's darkest secret. Not hidden, exactly. It is available to anyone who reads the item descriptions and puts the timeline together, but most players experience the Chalice dungeons as optional content, as a separate system rather than a parallel narrative, and so they miss the fact that Yharnam is not the first city to make these mistakes. It is the most recent. The Pthumerians made them first, then a surface civilization rose on top of Pthumerian ruins and made the same mistakes using the Pthumerian tools, and somewhere beneath that, There may be an even older civilization that preceded the Pthumerians and made the same mistakes before them. The game does not go that deep, but it suggests the depth is there. The secret of the Pthumerian elders, those ancient sorcerers who guard the deeper levels of the dungeons, is in their age. They are not simply old, they are sustained. The Pthumerian civilization collapsed, but these specific individuals did not die with it. They have been maintained by the blood, by proximity to the Great Ones, by the specific properties of the old labyrinths across a time span that should not be survivable. They are what long life looks like without the Erd Tree, without any benevolent framework for preservation. They are simply old, enormously, incomprehensibly old, and the wisdom that such age should have produced has instead curdled into something else. Something territorial and aggressive and reflexively hostile to anything new that enters their domain. They are not protecting anything worth protecting anymore. They are simply continuing the way old things continue when they do not know how to stop. The secret about the Pthumerian Queen Yharnam and her appearance on the surface of the game is one of the most visually arresting moments in all of Bloodborne, and one of the least discussed. She appears as a vision, a tall, dark-robed figure standing in specific locations at specific moments of cosmic significance. She does not speak, she does not interact. She is simply present, watching, witnessing, and then gone. What is she witnessing? She is watching the current civilization repeat her civilization's mistakes. She has seen this before, she has seen where it leads, and she cannot intervene, and she cannot warn, and she cannot do anything except be present, a ghost of a consequence that nobody is reading correctly. Her silence is not the silence of someone with nothing to say. It is the silence of someone who has tried saying it and learned that saying it does not help. The Chalice cups themselves, those ritual objects that you use to generate the dungeon content, are among the most significant artifacts in the game and the most under-examined. A chalice is a vessel, something you fill, something you drink from, something that moves a substance from one place to another, from source to recipient, from sacred to profane, from divine to human. The Pthumerian chalices are all of these things at once. They are the tools by which the old blood was administered in the most ancient rituals, the objects through which the Great Ones were called, the physical anchor for ceremonies that connected two vastly different orders of being. When you use them to generate dungeon content, you are performing, in highly abbreviated form, a Pthumerian ritual. You're reaching back through thousands of years of accumulated catastrophe and repeating the gesture that started it all. The game trusts you to feel the weight of this, even if it never explicitly names it. Here is a final secret about the Pthumerian civilization that explains something about the surface world most players never connect. The Pthumerian labyrinths are still expanding. If you spend time in the dungeons, particularly the procedurally generated root chalice dungeons, you encounter areas that appear freshly excavated. Walls that are rough rather than finished. Corridors that seem to be in process rather than complete. This is because the undead Pthumerian labourers, those shambling corpses you fight who still carry pickaxes and construction tools, are still working. They're still expanding the labyrinths according to plans that were finalised thousands of years ago, following instructions that no one has cancelled, because no one is left who has the authority to cancel them. The Pthumerian labyrinths are a construction project that has been running continuously since before the surface city existed, and that is still running now underneath your feet, carried out by the animated remains of workers who cannot rest because no one ever told them they were done. This is the most complete image of institutional inertia in the entire game. The civilization is gone, The purpose is lost. The planners are dead. The supervisors are dead. The clients are dead. And the workers are still working, still following the last instructions they were given, still expanding a project that has long since lost its reason for existing. They are not metaphors for the healing church exactly, but they rhyme with it. Institutions do not stop because their purpose disappears. They stop only when someone actively stops them, and in Bloodborne, no one is left who knows how to stop anything. Insight is the most philosophically loaded mechanic in Bloodborne, and its secrets are worth examining carefully in this final stretch before sleep finds you. Insight is described in the game as eyes on the inside. It is gained by discovering bosses, by consuming specific items, by successfully completing certain events. It is spent to summon other hunters or to purchase specific items from the insight shop in the dream. And it changes the world around you as it accumulates, not dramatically, not all at once, but persistently, incrementally. The world becomes slightly different the more insight you carry. The babies crying, the amygdalas becoming visible, the behavior of certain enemies shifting slightly, the messages from the messengers taking on a slightly different quality. These changes are not random. They are the game modelling, as mechanically as it can, what it actually looks like when a consciousness expands, when someone gains access to layers of reality that were previously inaccessible to them. The world does not change. You change. And because you change, you perceive things that were always there but that you lacked the apparatus to detect. Here is the secret about insight that most players miss because it is uncomfortable. High insight makes certain things harder. Enemies deal more damage in some areas at high insight levels. Certain encounters become more hostile. The world is not simply more comprehensible at high insight, it is also more dangerous. This is the game's honest acknowledgement that knowledge has costs, that the expanded perception that comes with insight is not pure benefit, that seeing more means being seen more, that opening yourself to greater awareness of the world also opens the world to greater awareness of you. The insight shop, accessible through the messengers in the dream, sells items that are not available anywhere else in the game. And the most interesting of these items, the ones that can only be purchased with insight rather than blood echoes, are items associated with the Great Ones, or with specifically forbidden knowledge. You are spending awareness to purchase more awareness, trading the insight you have accumulated for tools that will help you accumulate more. The economy of the insight shop is a closed loop, knowledge purchasing tools that generate knowledge, and the messengers who run it are the game's most enigmatic intermediaries, small tentacled creatures who worship the hunter in ways that suggest they understand something about the relationship between hunters and the greater cosmos that the hunters themselves do not. The messengers appear throughout the game in ways that most players experience as charming environmental detail without ever interrogating what they are. They are not enemies. They are not allies in any conventional sense. They leave notes for hunters. They ring bells. They decorate the dream. They worship. And their worship directed at the hunter implies that from the messenger's perspective, a hunter is something worth worshipping. Something that represents a category of being that the messengers find significant. What is a hunter, seen from the messenger's angle? A being who walks between the dream and the waking world, who dies and returns, who accumulates insight without being destroyed by it, at least for a while, who approaches the Great Ones and survives the approach. From a certain angle, a hunter is something remarkable. something that ought not to be possible. The messengers see this and express reverence, and the hunter moves through their small devotions without ever quite registering what is being said. Frenzy, the status effect that builds from certain environmental sources and particularly from looking at the brain of Mensis, is the game's most precise mechanical representation of what cosmic awareness actually feels like when you receive too much of it too fast. Frenzy does not simply damage you, it threatens to kill you instantly when its meter fills. It is not a wound, it is a breaking point. The moment when the amount of cosmic input you're receiving exceeds the amount your consciousness can process without fracturing. The brain of Mensis, that massive pulsating organ hanging in the nightmare, induces frenzy simply by being looked at, not by attacking you, not by approaching you, simply by existing in your visual field while you exist in its. Perception is the hazard, awareness is the damage source. You are hurt by knowing it is there, and the only defense against frenzy in these moments is to stop looking, to choose ignorance, to turn away from the thing you can see and pretend you cannot see it. Bloodborne gives you, for a moment, the choice to simply not know something, and it makes that choice painful in a different way. The pain of willful ignorance after involuntary awareness, the discomfort of choosing to unsee something you have seen. There are details in Bloodborne that do not fit neatly into any of the categories we've explored tonight, but that deserve their moment in the quiet before sleep. Small things, precise things, the kind of details that accumulate into a picture of a world that was built with extraordinary care by people who wanted you to feel, somewhere underneath all the horror and all the beauty, that you were in a place that was real. This sound design of Bloodborne contains secrets that most players experience only as atmosphere. The breathing of the beasts in the early game, those wolfish creatures in central Yharnam, is heavier and more laboured than it should be for creatures of their apparent fitness. They are struggling. Their transformed bodies are not optimised for the lives they are now living. The transformation that gave them power also gave them a physiology that does not quite work, that costs them more energy to maintain than a healthy body should. The sound tells you they are suffering even when the visual design presents them as threatening. You're fighting things that hurt all the time, even when they're not fighting you. The music of the Healing Church Workshop, that gentle and melancholy piano piece that plays in the hunter's dream, is the closest thing the game has to Gehrman's inner life made audible. It is not triumphant or dramatic. It is quiet and repetitive and a little bit sad, and it plays in the one place that Gehrman shaped according to his own preferences, in the version of his old workplace that he maintains in captivity. This is the music of someone who has made peace with something unbearable. Not happy, not miserable, simply present with what cannot be changed, finding in the rhythm of familiar things the closest available approximation of comfort. The note you find early in the game, the one that warns you to seek pale blood to transcend the hunt, is from Gehrman, or from whoever occupied Gehrman's role before the specific night of the game's events. It is institutional communication, a message passed from one iteration of the dream to the next hunter who arrives. The instructions for navigating a labyrinth left by someone who has navigated it before, not because they escaped, but because they are still in it and have learned its shape well enough to give directions. Gehrman has been leaving this note, or a version of it, for every hunter who has come through the dream. It is the distilled guidance of someone who has watched many hunters try and fail and try again, reduced to its most essential elements. Seek pale blood. Transcend the hunt. 6 words, the sum of everything anyone in the dream can tell you that will actually help, the Plain Doll's prayer, which you can find written in the game's lore materials, though she never speaks it aloud in the game itself, is addressed to no one. It asks for warmth for the hunters in her care. It asks in a gentle and uncertain way that suggests she does not know if she is capable of asking for things, whether she might be allowed to feel the warmth she tries to give. It is the prayer of a created thing reaching toward the possibility of genuine experience, toward the possibility that what she does and what she feels in doing it is real, rather than simply programmed. It is the most human thing in a game full of humans becoming inhuman, the artificial reaching toward the authentic, the constructed reaching toward the genuine. And because the game never tells you whether her prayer is heard or answered, you are left to decide whether the reaching itself is what matters, whether the desire for warmth is its own form of warmth. That is where we end tonight. Not with an answer, not with a resolution, with a question about reaching, about whether the desire for something real, for something genuine, for something beyond what you were built for or born into, is itself the thing you were reaching for all along. Bloodborne does not give clean endings. It gives choices. It gives evidence. It gives you the weight of everything it has shown you and asks what you will carry and what you'll set down. You've been here for a long time tonight. You have walked streets that were designed to make you feel watched. You have learned secrets that were designed to be found only by the patient and the curious. You have met people in their grief and their desperation and their genuine attempts to do something meaningful in a world that kept turning their attempts into catastrophe. Let us walk through Yharnam one more time before the night fully ends, not to discover more secrets, simply to be present in a place we've come to know differently than we knew it before. Central Yharnam. The first area. The gate you walk through at the beginning still bears the scorch marks of many hunts. The lamp at the beginning of the bridge is flickering tonight, as it always flickers, casting moving shadows that make the area seem more populated than it is. The dogs in the kennels to the right of the main path are quiet for now. They will not be quiet later. Nothing in Yharnam stays quiet for long. The bridge. The locals are gathered here as they always are, torches and pitchforks, calling out their warnings. Most of you have walked this bridge so many times that their voices have become part of the ambient sound rather than specific warnings. But they are specific people. They have names in the game's data. They had lives before the night of the hunt reduced them to this, to standing on a bridge shouting at strangers. Their torches are burning lower than they were. They have been out here for a while. The cathedral district. The lamps up here are brighter, better maintained. The area has more resources. The church takes care of its own neighbourhood even when the outlying districts are left to manage as best they can. The architecture is grander. The bloodstains on the cobblestones are fresher here, cleaned more recently. The evidence of the hunt managed more aggressively in the areas where the important people live. The upper cathedral ward sealed off from below. The door at the bottom of the lift that leads up here is locked from the other side, accessible only to those with the correct key. The choir members who lived and worked up here had the key. They could move between the upper and lower worlds at will. Everyone below could not come up without permission. The physical barrier between the ordinary ward and the upper cathedral is the church's power structure made architectural. The door says, there is a tier above this one. You are not in it. Byrgenwerth, the old college at the lake's edge. Willem's chair still faces the water. He is still in it. He has been in it since before you arrived in Yharnam, and he will be in it after you leave. The lake is still tonight, reflecting a sky that is not the same sky it was when you first arrived. Redder now, the blood moon still high. Rom is under the water somewhere, or the absence of Rom is under the water. The barrier is gone, the veil is lifted. What was hidden is now visible to anyone with eyes to see. Willem pointed at this lake for years before you came. He was pointing at the truth he could not quite say anymore. He was pointing at what his prize student had made inevitable, and what his greatest experiment has been sacrificed to conceal. He pointed, and nobody looked. And then you came and you looked, and you saw, and the veil fell, and now the sky is red, and there is no going back. The fishing hamlet, that rocky shore in the nightmare where everything that the game is truly about comes into focus. The water is the same grey-green it has always been. The villagers are here, or their echoes are. Hostile and grieving and not distinguishable from each other by anyone who was not here when the specific moment of atrocity was committed. Kos is on the shore, has always been on the shore, will always be on the shore in this space, in this frozen moment that the nightmare preserves, because some moments are too wrong to be allowed to pass. The orphan is somewhere in that body, or was, or will be again, now that you have given it an ending that the nightmare will eventually have to reset, because nightmares do not end, they simply cycle. And the hunter's dream, that peaceful garden at the edge of everything. The flowers are white tonight as they always are. The workshop is lit from within. The doll is in the garden tending to something, always tending to something, finding purpose in the maintenance of a space that exists for people who are always leaving. She looks up when she sees you. She is glad you came back. She is always glad. The white flowers are soft in the dim light. These stars above the dream are the wrong stars for a sky over Yharnam, stars that belong to a different dimension or a different time. Beautiful and cold and completely silent. Gehrman is in his chair. He is sleeping. You can hear him if you stand close enough and the night is quiet enough. He is muttering, asking for someone, asking to be released. He will not remember asking when he wakes. He never does. The dream keeps him. The dream keeps you. The dream keeps the doll. The dream keeps everything that enters it, gently and permanently, until something extraordinary comes along and changes the terms. You are extraordinary enough. You found the secrets. You learned the names. You walk the streets with attention and care and the patience to look at things twice, and then a third time, and notice what changed between looks. You did the thing that Yharnam asks of you that no boss fight or upgrade system can teach. You paid attention. Rest now. You have been paying attention for a long time tonight, and attention is its own kind of labour, worthy of its own kind of rest. Let the streets of Yharnam settle back into the part of your mind where worlds you love live. Let the gas lamps continue their vigil without you for a while. Let the doll tend her garden. Let Gehrman dream his difficult dreams. Let the great ones continue their incomprehensible business. In the dimensions that adjoin this one, you will return. You always return. And when you do, something will be different. Some detail will catch your eye that you never noticed before. Some connection will form between two things you thought were separate. Some secret will offer itself to the patience you have learned to bring to this world. Yharnam is not finished with you, but tonight at least, you are allowed to be finished with it. Thank you for spending these hours with Nightfall lore. If this slow walk through Yharnam's secrets meant something to you, please subscribe and leave a comment about the secret that landed hardest. Every comment, every subscription, every share is what keeps this channel doing what it does. Going slow, going deep, trusting you to keep up. Sleep well, good hunter. The hunt is over for tonight. Farewell. May the good blood guide your way. And should you wake, may you find your worth in the waking world.